Hey there, friends. It's Kodiak here, and welcome to Legacy Gaming. If you've been following the channel for the last couple of months, you might have noticed that Livid and I started covering all of the news surrounding Darkest Dungeon 2. The team behind the game, Red Hook Studios, has been steadily chugging away at development, and today I'm excited to welcome onto the channel Chris Bourassa, the studio's creative director. Chris, welcome. Thank you so much for making some time to talk to us, and let me be the first to say congratulations. Darkest Dungeon just recently passed 5 million units sold, and Darkest Dungeon 2 officially has an early access release date, October 26th.
Both of those things are true, and thank you very much for having me.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you. We managed to steal Chris away for about an hour, so we're not going to waste any time. I just want to let you all know that if you do have questions, feel free to jot those down in the comments. Livid, Click, and other members of our team are compiling a document. So during the last 15 minutes or so, we're going to ask Chris some community questions. With that out of the way, Chris, you ready to do this?
Let's roll.
All right, man. First question, super easy. How are things going on Darkest Dungeon 2?
Things are going quite well. It's a real credit to the team. We staffed up from the first game, and it's not easy to kind of go from like a clubhouse type vibe where there's, what's 5 to 7 of you, into like a larger kind of studio setup. I think we're upwards of 22, 23 now. But everybody has been really, really solid, especially as we've approached the launch date. And it's not perfect. No production cycle is without its flaws or its issues. But everybody's pulling together, and I feel like pretty excited about what we're making and excited to share it for sure. It's been a long time. We went dark for like quite a while on this game. We just didn't want to sort of keep teasing things out little bit by little bit. We sort of felt like going away and then coming back strong would be a good approach for us. And so I think the team is really like excited to sort of put out what we've sort of incubated for the past couple of years.
Yeah, you only get one chance to make a first impression, right? And that seems to be working for a lot of the smaller teams.
Yeah. Well, I hope it's a good impression, believe me.
Well, since you mentioned it, talk to me a little bit about expanding your team. I mean, you guys were such a small operation back in the day for Darkest Dungeon. You've expanded to a couple dozen. What are the things that you're seeing are really a benefit to the product? And as the creative director, how have your hats kind of changed leading this project?
Well, I don't know how many of your viewers have like illustrated an entire game themselves, but it's like it was exhilarating and exhausting, and I just recognized that I just didn't have that in me, and to do it entirely a second time. And it's also like it's kind of a wonderful thing to share something. And so I'm a huge, like I said before, we have a really, really solid team, and it's been awesome watching them like grow their ownership of the project as they contribute and enhance it. And so, I'm still both Tyler Sigmund, the company's co-founder and design director, and I refuse to sort of back off the product. So we grew the team, but like both of us still have like jobs. Like I'm doing icons like right now, and he's
true. He was doing that while we were waiting.
Because yeah, exactly. And I'm tempted to kind of get back to it, to be honest, but I won't. Right. You can see my hands.
It's all right.
So we felt like, whatever success we had managed to find with the first game, we don't take for granted that we can just ring it up and do it all again. And one of the key ingredients in Darkest Dungeon was that the two of us worked our asses off on it. And so we didn't want to change that and put ourselves into purely management positions. So we augmented the team based on the roles we felt we needed filled, and have maintained our own sort of like connection to the product, really like getting our hands dirty. The downside is like I have too many jobs. I could probably be a little more effective if I had a few fewer hats. But again, it just comes down to like working with people that you have a high degree of confidence in, and everybody's kind of trying to help each other out. And it's a really amazing feeling to sort of sign off for the day and come in the next day and see something is better or improved or now present that wasn't there before. And that feels really great. And so we try to really celebrate that stuff.
That's great. I'm excited to see. I mean, expanding your team that much, it's going to have a noticeable impact. I know you've talked about in your interviews, animations being cleaner, more complex, and there's just so much that I think a lot of people are going to be surprised at. Like, you guys did a ton of work, like you said, for Darkest Dungeon. All right, now let's see it at the next level, what you guys can do with a bigger team, more passion, more resources. It's going to be exciting stuff.
I hope so. One of the biggest decisions we made early on, and probably the riskiest, was we didn't want to make the same game again. Right. A lot of sequels, seek to simply, well, not simply, it's a lot of work, but to elevate everything from the first effort to a higher level on the second one. And we just felt like we want Darkest Dungeon 1 and 2 to sit side by side in your library, and maybe some days you feel like playing Darkest Dungeon 1 and other days you feel like playing Darkest Dungeon 2. We didn't want to try to render the first one obsolete by virtue of there being a sequel. So we took a lot of risks creatively, mechanically. It is a different video game. Its core thematics, the narrator, the audio, the characters are all back. The art styles, adjusted but preserved. So but it has elements of a spiritual successor as opposed to a straight sequel. And that we did that because we wanted to be excited and afraid. Yeah. Because those were two ingredients that went into the first game. It was just crushing fear and excitement all at once, all the time, which is an addictive cocktail emotionally, let me tell you. Yeah. But we recognize that, if we just do sort of a 1.5 and plus things up and roll out the same game, even our most hardcore fans might be disappointed because they'll be like, well, this is so anecdotal to the first experience that, there isn't really enough here that's caught me by surprise and was fresh. And I think part of the appeal of the first game was some of that freshness. And so we're trying to recreate that by not repeating ourselves exactly. Gotcha. And really excited to see how that lands. Nice. Terrified, but I like that, the combination of fear and passion, and it's great. All right, well, niceties out of the way. Now it's time for the hard questions. We gave him 10 minutes, folks. Yeah. Let's drill into this. So you've done a number of interviews, mostly in print form, magazines and such. And one thing I've noticed is that people are having a really hard time understanding what we're going to call the loop of Darkest Dungeon 2. Now, would you mind just breaking that down in your own words so people have an understanding of what they can expect when they play this game on October 26th? Okay, well, the loop in Darkest Dungeon 1 was take your dudes, send them out, they all get stressed and beat up, maybe you get to rest a little bit, bring them back, increase their stats, tinker with them, cool them down, switch to your other team, rinse, repeat. And that loop was, extremely effective. This is much more of a roguelike run-based game. So the loop is pick your 4 guys, jump in a stagecoach, drive across this world that's completely falling apart, get to the mountain, beat the boss, and then loop back around, pick 4 guys, off you go. At the end of each region that you clear, there's an inn, which is anecdotal to the Hamlet from the first game, and it's like our animation and effects guys have done an amazing job of the characters sprawled out, exhausted in these chairs, and then that's where you can kind of tinker with them, and it's like you and I will play cards, and as a result we develop a stronger relationship. But then you hate Paul over there, and so as a player I'm like, I gotta get Legacy and Paul to be friends because they're constantly bickering and fighting, and so that's where the sort of tinkering management Hamlet phase kind of kicks in. And then you get back on the road and you're driving along, you're engaging in combats. You have to manage your torchlight, and you do that by helping people. So you look at a mini map and you plot your route, just like a dungeon in the first game. You're going, well, I want to get the watchtower so I can understand the lay of the land. From there, maybe I'm going to have to fight these monsters. Then I'm going to move forward. I'll help out these people on the side of the road. That'll plus my torch up, which should put me in a pretty good position to do a run at this dungeon. So each region has a boss, but it's optional because ultimately the goal of the game is to get you to the top of the mountain and to fight the boss there. Got it. So it's so great to hear you say it out loud, not just in writing, because it's hard to wrap your head around it in writing. Especially with flowery language and stuff like that. Hearing you say it out loud,
I hope people are excited about that because it took me a while to break it all down.
I'm trying to be a little reductive too. Like I could plus it up with some marketing speak, I suppose, but yeah, I'm trying to just speak in brass tacks in terms of what you're going to do. There's tons of quirks. There's like road quirk. You're driving along, and if you get like this annoying whistler quirk, like the guy's constantly whistling and it pisses everybody else off in the stagecoach. Like really, what the game is the first game was like a hockey coach simulator where you've got 30 people and you're cycling out your lines, right? And they get injured and screwed up, and you kind of roll with it. This is a road trip simulator. I have 2 children. Drive them anywhere. And, they want to turn left when you want to go right. They're fighting, they're bickering, they're sometimes quiet and cool. But really, we wanted to try to like lean into this, like you've got 4 kids in the back. And so even when you come up to a fork in the road, some of them will be like, I want to go fight. And someone else will be like, I want to go to the store. And so you have to choose. Someone's going to be unhappy. And then, they get stressed out and things start to fall apart from there. We're definitely committed to things falling apart. That's
as you were in the first game.
Core
let's
principle
be honest.
For us here. Yeah.
All right, so let's. I'm going out of turn here because this is what happens in every interview. So you mentioned roguelike. Now, we can get into this argument if you really want to, Chris. But roguelike and roguelite are 2 different things. I'm just curious, where you guys come down on the mountain. Is there progression between runs, or are you starting fresh, block 1 every single time?
There is progression on a profile level. So we score you at the end of a run. Essentially, the torch is like a symbol of hope in the game, and you can't let it go out or it's run over.
Just kaput, run over.
Well, you get ambushed by the cultists, and you get kind of like a campaign death door. Like you get one last stand to sort of like stay in the fight. But if all your guys wipe, it's permadeath on a run. So if you lose your occultist in the second region, like he's gone. There's the ability to sort of get another character back to keep your run going. So we want you to keep playing. Like we don't want to like just shut the door on you. But when they die, they're dead for that run. And then at the end of the run, you get scored, you get awarded unlocks. So the quality of loot in the next run will increase. More and more advanced trinkets and stagecoach upgrades will become available to you. Heroes will become available to you, hero skills, that kind of thing.
So more of a roguelite where you are getting to a point, you're wiped, you do have to start back at the beginning, but there are these progression elements overarching that are going to keep you pushing further, hopefully, in the game.
Yeah, and hopefully advantage you a little bit so that you can start trying some sort of like, I mean, it's an interesting concept, I feel like, because let's say like some of our toughest content is there's like layers for bosses, and you can drive around them. Like you don't have to, you could plot a route that doesn't take you there. But they're really there for some of the best loot in the game. And so, an experienced player with a decent profile who's advantaged at the start of a run might be bullish and attempt something like that. Whereas like starting out in your first run, I probably wouldn't recommend trying to rush the boss. I mean, go for it.
Right? You
Stream it. Yeah, you can. So we want to make sure that you feel good even when you fail to some degree. And it's a little bit, again, like analogous to the first game where, the Hamlet progression doesn't go anywhere. And that's kind of what keeps you, your ability to recruit and train augments over time, but your assets on the field are still like disposable and vulnerable. So.
Gotcha. So just a quick question off the heels of that one then. So the trinkets, which are the only item that players are going to be collecting in this game, correct?
No, there's trinkets, there's stagecoach upgrades. Okay. Every hero has, there was only 7 skills per hero. Now there's 11, I think. So you'll unlock their skills as you play the game.
And those are all going to carry over into future runs.
Yeah. So if you start playing, you have like the Highwayman's default skills, but I've maxed him out. Like he's a level 5 or whatever in my profile. So I have like all 11 skills open, and I can swap them out to like deal with the different threats of the different biomes. So I have more versatility. So it's like a horizontal growth as opposed to a power leap.
Now that's, you say profile based. So your Highwayman's max level. Even if you lose your Highwayman, the next Highwayman you get is going to have that progression?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. That's really good. I don't think people really understood that, to be honest. It was one of the things, that plus the loop, just a lot of newness. And I don't think people were understanding that there is a lot of new here.
Yeah, there's a fair amount of new, and I'm pretty pleased with like how we've like thematically wrapped it up. The player is working through some of your own failures, and you meet these other failed people on the road, and you recruit them. And so as you kind of like learn more about the heroes, you will unlock their skills and grow from there. So it like ties into the main narrative of the story as well.
Great. All right, so let's keep drilling down on the loop, because another thing that we saw pop up all the time on all of the videos that we put out, you had mentioned, and I can't remember which interview it was, PC Gamer, you estimated a run would take 5 hours, and internet people assumed that meant the game was 5 hours long. So obviously that's not the case, but can you just talk about how this shift to that more roguelike approach is really going to make the game more replayable in a sense, and how that 5 hours is not total playtime, it's just the experience in kind of finite terms?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you don't mind, I could go back a step earlier for context. We released the first game without an end game in early access, and it lived its entire life in early access without anyone being able to beat it. So you just kind of grind and play. And I thought, and we thought it would be really exciting if we held back the end game until the 1.0 release. So even if you'd been tracking the game and playing it during early access, the release day was still a big deal for you, because finally you could, finish this thing.
Right.
So that's all great. And from a marketing standpoint and an excitement standpoint, I think it worked awesome. The problem is we had no idea how long it would take you to go from 0 all the way to the end game, because the end game never existed.
Right.
And
was it an afterthought?
I think no, it wasn't an afterthought. It's just it wasn't implemented, so we have no metrics on it. And so I think it's a fair criticism of Darkest Dungeon that it drags in the middle. It's bloated in the middle. It takes a little. It's too grindy at points. It can exhaust people. Totally fair critique. We did our best to remedy that with the Radiant update, but by then we had people who had beaten it, and how terrible would it feel to be like, oh, I beat like the original version and then they shortened it and now everyone's beaten it. You'd kind of like, we'd rob people of this like insane achievement that they, were like righteously proud of. So the Radiant update was our attempt to sort of like shave down some of that and make it work. But at the end of the day, the game was the game. And we wanted to, really try this different approach to alleviate that concern. We don't want sort of mission after mission that feels like you kind of aren't getting anywhere, or you're just trying to get resources, and one day you'll have something fun and exciting happen to you. So 5 hours, 3 to 5 hours is a run, but you can't see all the content in a run. And so, our goal is when the game is complete, that you'll end up spending roughly the same amount of time that you spent in Darkest Dungeon 1 and Darkest Dungeon 2 to like unlock everything that the heroes have to offer, defeat all the different the bosses, explore all the different content and node types and encounter types that we have, and that each run will sort of feel a little bit different. At early access launch, we don't have like all of the 1.0 content in the game, obviously, but we have like a pretty robust amount, and we're hoping that the kind of emergent gameplay around the relationships and make for those good like water cooler moments, similar to the first game.
Yeah, and you mentioned this a few times and already today, and then in previous interviews, the thematic thing is really important to you guys. And I don't know if you ever played Dead Cells, but this is kind of what their team did. And I see the similarities between your game and Dead Cells, where you've got the start point and you've got the end point, and you can actually expand the middle as much as you want, because, and that's that I can't remember off the top of my head. I have it written down somewhere here. You revealed one of the factions in the last interview that you did. So, the expansion of the themes, you mentioned that every area is a different theme, but it's always going to end at the mountain, right? So maybe you can tease some of the things you're already thinking about as you head towards 1.0, but how are you going to expand those thematic elements throughout early access?
Well, it's beautiful for that, actually, because, we're launching with 3 core regions, an associated like beefy monster faction and boss in each thing, just like the first game. Three dungeons launched. We have a bonus secret area as well that you could maybe encounter on some runs and not on others. We have an intro area and we have the mountain area. And throughout early access, like one of the things we want to do is add more biomes in the fullest sense of the word. So a new environment, new encounter types, new monster faction. And we can just slide that into the game. And now, you don't know when you get to an inn, you're not sure which biome is waiting for you or which region you're going to be able to choose. You get a choice of two. So the more of those we have in the game, the more different each run becomes because you're seeing less of the same stuff.
Right.
And it's modular that way. And I think it's going to be great fun to really beef that out. I would love to get us to a point where, you feel like, well, I was in the city, mainly in this run, but then I was disadvantaged because I had the runaway who's a fire hero, and I had to screw around with her kits, and I didn't have anything unlocked. And then I got to the inn, but I was like, I didn't want to go to the farm because she's, I wasn't prepared for the blight. And so that sort of like stress on players is really what we want to get. Give you a bunch of tactical options, and then as early access progresses, slot in more of these kind of modular pieces of content that will enrich a run experience, and then slowly over time help differentiate the runs from each other.
Right.
My hope is that at 1.0, people play the game and no one's really having the same experience. I think at early access, to be totally frank, the experiences will be more similar because there's going to be less content than there will be in a year from now.
Right. But you can just slot all of those in. I mean, it's brilliant design, and the companies that have been able to do that, like you're talking about modularity within their roguelike games, have found a lot of success because the expansion in the middle actually makes for that more diverse, full experience at the end of the day.
Absolutely. And it's fun for us. Like, it's a lot of work to get things up and running, and it's kind of thankless, especially shifting to 3D. We had to rebuild everything, and our engineers have worked really, really hard. But it's not fun work, like framing the house. Like, no one's like, oh, I had a great time framing my house and pouring the concrete foundation. No, they want to talk about what color the rooms are going to be, right, what the crown moldings are. I don't even know why I'm using a construction analogy.
That's
I can't even hang a picture. I'm not a guy's guy at all.
You didn't hang those pictures behind you, right? Those massive pictures?
No, these are from PAX a couple of years ago. I didn't even. I attached them.
But to your point, the foundation is the most important thing.
It is, but it's also the least exciting from a development standpoint.
Right.
Whereas like when we start going, okay, the game is up and running, people are hopefully enjoying it, and then the question becomes like, well, now what can we do? Because we have, it functions, the framework is in and happening, and we can really start having fun with like the types of things that we're putting in.
Right, you're thinking about expansion. You're thinking about how do I keep this experience growing? You're not stuck in the confines of your foundation. That's what you guys, I think that's, for me, somebody that loves systems, that's what I've noticed the shift from DD1 to DD2 is you guys are like, okay, we can build a mansion if we want, but we're going to start with just the single room house. But there's all this room to move and grow and expand.
I mean, the first one was quite similar. Like I said, we launched with 3 dungeons. We added the cove. We added the town attack thing, and over the course of adding DLCs to the game, we've grown and grown and grown, expanded it. But the foundation remained intact. You get stressed, you get afflictions. This is how combat works. But we've added mechanics and polished things up over time. And Darkest Dungeon as a complete product with all the DLCs is like, there's a lot in there. There's a ton in there. And so our hope is to get the sequel to the same level of, like diversity and robustness. Yeah.
All right, let's change gears quite a bit. We could talk about systems and foundations of houses all day long. What I want to talk about is the mod scene. Original Darkest Dungeon, massive success, no doubt. But and it's a true testament to your team, honestly. But a large part of why the game is still incredibly popular 6 years later is because of the modding community. So obviously the game's launching in early access on Epic, but you clearly have a plan, and there will be mod support in some capacity. So talk about your relationship with the modding community and how you hope to see it grow in Darkest Dungeon 2.
Well, it's a profoundly impactful thing to see the amount of modding effort that people have put into Darkest Dungeon. And before we started casting, I mentioned, but I'll say it again, like if someone were to cut their teeth on modding for our game and then go on to work in the games industry, or like that's a really special kind of a magical thing to be a part of. So we love it. We do our best to support the modding community by showcasing some of their work. When we were actively developing Darkest Dungeon, we would take mod requests in terms of like feature sets that they felt like they needed or would be really helpful for them to facilitate their modding efforts. We implemented those. So we're big fans, and we recognize how valuable the modding community has been for us, and it's quite frankly kind of staggering the number of mods that are out there. We have a policy that we don't play them, and we don't look at them. Our social media manager will sort of like tweet them out, and I'm aware in terms of like, this looks neat, that looks neat. But we really refrain from engaging with the mods ourselves, because we feel like ethically we have to keep a bit of a line. So that, kind of like a book publisher, they don't take unsolicited manuscripts in the event that they've already, got a project underway that's like similar or some way. So we sort of try to walk that line with the mods. And, we launched the game unencrypted in Darkest Dungeon 1, so we invited it, we want it, and our philosophy hasn't changed. Day one, will it be the most mod-friendly environment in the world? No, it's not finished. And day one, Darkest Dungeon wasn't, as robustly supportive of modding as it is today. But the same people are in charge, and the same sort of appreciation and priorities and respect for modding exist at our studio. And so, we're going to take every opportunity we can over the coming year to make that as easy as possible for people. Like, it's something that we treasure, and it means a lot. So we just need probably a little bit of patience from people. Like, at minute one, day one, it's not going to afford you the same level of options for modding as Darkest Dungeon 1 does, because it's just less mature. Yeah, I think like...
So the API won't be available on day one for everybody to just... You're not giving them the keys to the castle, but maybe... Is it going to happen during early access, you think, or wait until it comes out on Steam?
I think it's just going to be something that we just work with as we go. I mean, I'm happy for... You want to overtune stress, you want to undertune stress. It's fine. I'm not sure how that plays with the EGS doesn't have the same mod workshop. So it's just going to be a bit of a different environment. But again, like our priorities and the value that we place on modding at the studio, hasn't changed. And it's the same people setting the priorities as it was the first time out. So we just, I don't know, asking for a little bit of patience, but a little bit of confidence that, we want to bring these people along, and there's nothing better than to feel like your game is being like richly appreciated, and people are spending their own free time playing in the space that you made for them. So I want nothing more than to do that again for people, for sure. And
just to confirm, so I know you've said it, but let's just make sure that we say it. Early access, 1 year on Epic, or more than that, up until the 1.0 launch, which also is going to coincide with a Steam launch.
Yeah, we'll be on Steam and Epic day one for the 1.0, and it's a year of early access that we're going to do on EGS.
Now, is there a chance that early access could go beyond a year and you'll have to wait to put it on Steam until 1.0, or is it like 1 year and then it's going to Steam no matter where it is?
Well, I mean, I didn't know there was a chance of a pandemic.
You didn't plan for that? Come on.
I didn't plan for the pandemic. No, so I can't really answer that because I don't know what I don't know.
Okay.
All I know is what our operational protocols are right now, which is a year of early access, and then we're going to try and get the thing as many places as we can when it's all cooked up and it's packed full of content and we're ready to go. So
great. All right, well, let's shift again. I don't know if you've been looking at the chat. I've kind of been glancing over here. A lot of talk about characters, and I know you've already revealed 9 of them at launch, early access launch, I should say. Grave Robber, Occultist, Plague Doctor, Man-at-Arms, Leper, Jester, Highwayman, Hellion, and the Runaway. There are some noticeable absences on that list.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, you do. I'm going to ask you about it. I need you to tell me what's going on. Are we going to see some more old friends return, or are we going to see a lot more new friends come into the picture?
Well, when it comes to characters, I'm very inspired by this Street Fighter. I'm terrible at Street Fighter, but I love how they have this like core cast of characters that they bring forward into the next one, and then you're like, who the hell is Cody? You know what I mean? I just remember.
Feel free to put me in Darkest Dungeon too. That'd be really cool, by the way.
Sounds good. Easy. So I love that. Because your heart breaks a little bit, and then you got to get used to the new guy. But then sometimes the new guy or girl is like pretty cool, and you're kind of like, I don't know, like I'm a big Viper fan. It's a good look, and so I really like that kind of evolving approach. So when I polled the team, I made everybody vote. Then I took those votes and just decided what you wanted to do.
I took those votes, I put them over here.
So the Abomination is 2 characters, right? Mm-hmm. So I could give you 2 heroes or 1 Abomination. Abomination, you got to take a back seat. Like if we're talking about trying to get the most options available for players at early access launch, you have to kind of take these really, practical stands. So Abomination is 2 characters. Houndmaster, kind of 2 characters, right? Adorable, love the dog. I'm not a big dog. Tyler loves the dog, but it's kind of 2 characters. So we could have a guy and a dog, or we could have a hero and a new monster. So what's healthier for the game's ecosystem at launch? Probably the hero and the monster, because you're going to fight the monster more often.
All right. Well,
we kind of just worked through some of that.
But you're beating around the bush.
Cool.
You're beating around the bush. The one character everybody's asking about.
You want the Crusader, do you?
It's not what I want. It's what the community wants. I'm just the messenger. Don't kill the messenger. Give me slightly thumbs up or thumbs down. You can be subtle about it. I won't tell anybody. I won't tell Tyler.
Okay, you don't have to tell Tyler.
Oh, come on, that's that.
But what I think is important is that early access is interesting and exciting and is its own little narrative. Okay, so if I tell you right now, here's all the characters we're going to add. We're going to add 3 new ones.
You take away all the fun.
Ones. Exactly. So I don't want to talk about if the Crusader is going to come back or not, because I think it would be way more exciting for people to have it revealed to them in the game.
Great. I love it.
What I will say though is, and I know I'm being evasive, but I want to preserve that sense of mystery. I think that's like what makes good horror is uncertainty, and that's what made a good game the first time out is uncertainty and imperfect information. So I'm trying to espouse those values. I think that we want to add some new cast members for sure, but we want to bring back a lot of the favorites. I mean, we spoke initially, Tyler and I, a lot, like right at the outset, and I was like, we both love this movie Fury. We could do Darkest Dungeon in a tank in the future. Like that would be really cool.
Fury with Brad Pitt and Shia LaBeouf?
Yeah,
I love that movie.
Yeah.
Great movie.
And they're in love, but they can't. It's so sweet. Anyway, I sort of like half pitched that, like, we could do it in the future and everything. And then we're like, well, people have like tattooed these characters on themselves. There's crazy, so much fan art out there. And to be honest, like that's such a rare and frankly like beautiful thing for such a small game or small studio to achieve that level of like people are so attached to these characters that we made. We just felt like we could do more with them, and we didn't want to throw them all out. And so like we want to bring them back, but we recognize that again, just the same way we don't want to do the same game again, we want to bring back everybody exactly the same way as they were. So we want to have some fun surprises along the way.
That was the longest beating around the bush ever, but I love it.
But it's a solid bush beat.
It was a solid one. It was good. All right, so let me poke you one last time then on this one topic that I promise we'll move on. So you're a man of themes. You like thematic things, and you are obviously you've gone to bed thinking about this game. You've woken up thinking about this game. There must be a new character, completely new, that you've already themed out in your head. Can you give us a little tease? Maybe just some ideas. You don't have to tell us the name or what their kit is, but just a theme that you're thinking about for a new character.
You're gonna be so disappointed. I'm not. We have so much work to do. I'm not thinking about the new characters.
All right, fine. I'll take it, Chris. I'll take it.
We're building up. Here's what I can say this. We're building up the original roster and adjusting their proportions and making them in 3D so that we have them on deck, and we're gonna add new ones. But like the way we approach character building at Red Hook is it's definitely theme first, but like the runaway, we needed someone to espouse the burn dot. Yep. That was going to be her role from day one, and we tried a couple of different themes and ideas to shake that out and settled on her. So it's going to be really interesting to see where the holes are in this initial roster of 9, and that will inform to some degree the type of hero that we roll out. Like if people are really lamenting the lack of, I don't know, crowd control, or just feel like they want another like straight up damage dealer or whatever it is, that's really valuable and interesting for us, and can have a real concrete impact on our creative choices in the studio. So I don't have like a half drawn.
You don't have a journal sitting by your bed where you're drafting out these imperfect characters?
No. I mean, I will say like the flagellant was one of the original ideas we had, but it was just too wacky to just roll out the gate with. Because all of our heroes are superheroes, right? Like they're just medieval superheroes. They all have an origin story. They all have their superpowers. They all have their costumes. And that's like that DNA is in there. I grew up reading superhero comics, and I felt like it was a great way to differentiate like our IP or our take on low fantasy has a bit more of that in it. So I want to be able to continue that like level of integrity, and I'm really proud of the runaway. I think she's great. I think she totally lines up with the other characters. It preserves that idea of like being kind of like a left of center choice, a little unexpected, and we really take care with that. So I don't know.
That's great. There was a great beefy conversation about characters where we really didn't get much, but it was still riveting the entire way through.
I love the power fists in Warhammer. I've had that kicking around in my head for a while.
Okay.
And I think but it's cool to have a team of, a bigger team. You can kind of bounce stuff off them, and we'll learn as we go. But sometimes it's just a little hook like that sparks a.
Yeah. No, I just want you to know that during that entire conversation, the one thing people got out of it was that you don't like dogs. So if you see that kicking around Twitter or something throughout,
I'm fine with that.
Okay,
I'm fine with that.
As long as you're cool with it. All right, let's change gears again. Let's get off characters for a minute, and let's talk about healing. It was obviously a big part of DD1. There was a weird, you really had to pump your healing to stay in the loop sometimes. So you guys are completely changing that up. Just give me a rundown. How is healing going to work in Darkest Dungeon 2?
Well, I mean, Tyler and the other designers, James and Dana, are probably the can speak mechanically to exactly how they're tuning it. Philosophically, we want you to be able to run without a healer. We also want to sort of try to avoid the stalling pitfall of the first game. So driving in the coach has a passive heal on your guys. So as you drive, they will heal up, and you can get an upgrade to augment that effect. If your torch is running low, it might diminish it, that kind of thing. There's also combat consumables that we have now, which are a free action. So if you loot, like a triage kit, or you buy one, you can give it to a character, and they carry it into the fight with them, and it's like a free slot. And it doesn't cost your turn to use it. So you can provision well and heal that way by just slotting healing items on all your characters and hoping that you can kind of keep your cash high enough to be able to afford them throughout the whole run. Or you can use some of the healing skills on the heroes. There's some interesting stuff. Healing won't kick in until some certain health thresholds. So we don't want you topped up, because the stagecoach driving is really the thing that tops you up. Healing in Darkest Dungeon 2 is more about staying alive. So you should expect to kind of ride a little bit of a lower health threshold. But Plague Doctor heals, Occultist heals, Hellion has a small self heal. Leper does too. And Grave Robber, I believe, can get a little piece off of her Absinthe. So generally, with a bigger skill kit, the heroes are more adaptable and a little bit more self-sufficient, but it will come at the cost of like one of the other skills. So it's a bit of a pivot to avoid the sort of stalling pitfall, and the stalling stuff isn't really fun for anybody, although it's like a bit of an exploit.
You're trying to cut out the fat of something that wasn't engaging.
Yeah, exactly. And we also want you to be worried. Like, we want you riding that line of like, oh God, we just had our asses kicked. There's a barricade in the middle of this road, which means I'm going to have to fight, brigands. And, but I don't want to go the other road because that's the boss route. And, what the hell do I do? Like those decision points are really important. And so if you're sort of constantly, sitting pretty at full health, it robs a lot of the tension and drama out of it. So we want to make sure that you're kind of, you're in a constant state of jeopardy.
Gotcha. All right, I'm going to try and sneak in a couple more questions before we go to the community stuff. I'll try and fire them off as quick as I can. One of the things that I noticed, and it was a really sneaky picture that you put in there in one of the interviews, it was one time. Map looks very similar to Curse of the Dead Gods. Not sure if you've played that game, but basically you are mapping out your travel plans, right? A little bit different than what you did in Darkest Dungeon. Along the way, you've already mentioned the Watchtower. We've seen that. You've mentioned, obviously, you're going to run into people by the lamppost that you can help. Talk to me about that journey. How do you decide where to go? What are some of the waypoints that people are going to be engaging in? And how does combat, like you mentioned the barricade and the brigands, how does all of it come together in the stagecoach portion, the travel portion of the game?
Well, you've got your character's health, you've got their stress levels, and you have the torch, which is sort of like the symbol, the last hope for the world that you can't let kind of go out. And different node types will give you different types of rewards. So typically, if you go and fight the representative enemy faction in a region, you'll be rewarded with like cash and combat power, so trinkets, and that's you'll augment your ability to fight that way. If you choose routes that are more assistance based, you'll be rewarded with supplies and torch, as a sort of measure of your goodwill. Then there's the things like there's a store node. There's like you mentioned, the Watchtower. There's the boss layers. And a few other types. And so really what we want you doing is sort of doing you get to a fork in the road, and there's also the hero preferences. So you get to a fork in the road, they'll beak off about what one they want. And you have to kind of weigh the expected gains versus, the cost to travel there and the current condition of your sort of core stats, your core run stats, health, stress, torch.
Are you making these decisions in real time? So as you're traveling in your thing, you see, the map, you can pull up the map, you go left here, you can go right here, and you're doing that all in real time.
Yeah, you literally drive the little stagecoach. I mean, you don't have to steer it too much. We kept saying, like, it was a big thing on the team, like, we're not making a driving game. It's not a driving game. You don't drift. You're not like trying to, thread the needle or anything like that. But, for the sake of immersion, we could have done just a node map, right? Where you just look at the map, you have a little icon of a stagecoach, and you're like, I click here, and then you just have an encounter. Right. But the same way, like, we don't want to give you God's eye perspective. It's the same reason why, we developed this sort of side-on combat and approach, and, this kind of becomes signature to the franchise. But we didn't want a top-down tactics map because it implies that you have this like breadth of information. Right. And so to deliver on a road trip kind of feel, we took the risk, and we're going to put you right on the road. Yeah,
you want it to unfold in front of us.
Yep, exactly. And it's more aspirational. Like, we got to get over the horizon. We got to get somewhere. Like that feels, as opposed to a flat 2D map view, it doesn't have the same, it doesn't evoke the same kind of emotional response, I don't feel, just even on a latent level. But yeah, you're driving along, pressing W and steering your coach, and there's stuff you can smash into on the, like, vases in an ARPG on the road, and you can pull up the map. You can kind of see where you want to go. You can kind of look ahead depending on how well you've scouted, and go, well, the left route splits off over here and then splits off again. But if I stick to the left-hand side and then cut to the middle in a few nodes, that looks like a good strategy for me. And then, you're on the ground executing it.
Well, you said one of the key words there from Darkest Dungeon, scouting. How's that going to work in Darkest Dungeon 2?
Well, I mean, like the Watchtower node will reveal the region for you, and then there's like a base scouting chance. So you'll kind of roll into an area, and some of these things will be unknown to you. I think it's an aggregate, a party-based scouting stat, but I don't quote me on that just yet.
So if you get to the Watchtower, you're going to be able to see where what each node is, basically.
Yep. And that's a I always go to the Watchtower. Big Watchtower guy myself. Want to know what's going on.
Tips and tricks already before the game's even out.
Yeah, exactly. But I have been in a situation where, although I wanted to choose it, it's also great because it's not a fight, so you won't get beat up at the Watchtower.
Yep.
But I've been in a situation where there's a field hospital where you can like treat your diseases and quirks and that kind of thing. And sometimes when that pops up, that's super valuable too. And so you're like, well, I just started this biome, but I really need to heal. Do I forego the knowledge of the region in favor of getting my health, sort of stabilized? And that level of tension, I think, is where Darkest Dungeon 2 starts to really shine. It's also the consideration of what's next after that, after the field hospital node. Like, where does that road take you? And those considerations are important too.
Gotcha. All right, so obviously the real emphasis is on the journey, right? And you've talked about the road trip experience. It's a road trip simulator with all of the nuances of the Darkest Dungeon team. But one of the things that's a really big change and newish feature is the relationships. We kind of talked about it quickly before. Gameplay implications. You don't like me, I don't like you. What changes in the gameplay?
You're in a fight. And you get knocked out of position, so you need to move this, your leper back to the front for whatever reason, and you're in a suspicious relationship with somebody. You'll try to do it, it'll be blocked, and you'll be like, no, he's up to something. I don't trust this guy. Like, don't let him move to the front, kind of thing. So we still toy with player agency the same way we did with Afflictions in the first game. And there's kind of a beauty to it. Like, it's a sequel. It's Darkest Dungeon 2, and now the Afflictions involve 2 people. So you end up pairing them up like that. So even amorous, which can develop between any two characters, isn't necessarily like a huge, universally positive. It's classified as a positive relationship, but they can get really upset when the other person gets hurt. They can take stress themselves. They can throw themselves in front of a blow that's coming for their lover. Which is, very beautiful and noble, but maybe they're already on death's door and They do it anyway, which is kind of like the big Holly, like, I'll sacrifice myself for you. But as a player, you'd be like, you idiot, like, why? We're really trying to just tackle in. You have a number of characters, but the relationships between them are more complex this time.
Gotcha. And so to kind of offset these, help with the relationships or hurt the relationships, it all takes place at the in between the biomes, right?
Yeah. So your stress level will inform how kind of chippy you are. So high stress characters will start developing a negative affinity towards each other, which is the build on the way to a relationship. So, I'm really stressed out and I'm like, well, quit picking your nose. Why are you wearing your hat backwards? YouTube is never going to take off. And you're just getting more and more
tell
and more
me twice.
And then at a certain point, the relationship is tested, and turns out you and me are envious of each other. So in a fight now, as a player, you're like, oh my god, they're constantly chirping, they're constantly trying to take things from each other, and you just have to juggle that. And when you get to the inn, you can kind of do your best based on the rest items that you have, and be like, okay, let's get Chris and Legacy to drink whiskey and then play cards and then read a joke book together, and just throwing all these activities, so many activities. And then hopefully you can kind of bring it down, but the relationships will change over the course of the game.
Now, is that a visual, is it something visually for the players to see, okay, Chris and Cody are here, can we bring that bar down to here?
Yeah. I mean, we love systems, and so it's gamey, same as stress in the first game. So you can see it build up. It's easier to create negative relationships than positive relationships. It doesn't take as much to create a negative
That
relationship.
sounds like the most Darkest Dungeon thing I've ever heard.
Yeah, 100%. This is a no-brainer. But yeah, you can be like, wow, I really don't want them. They're right at the limit, and this is going to be a huge problem if I let it kind of go on. So as soon as we get to the end, I better get these guys something to kind of ameliorate the situation, which it increases the value of the hoarder, who's our store node. You might want to provision for the inn later. Good players will want to think ahead.
All right, so this is all great, Chris. Thank you. So let me dive into some of the community things that people are piping my way here. And I'll give you a pass. You can pass on one of them. If you don't want to talk about it, just say pass. I'll give you one free pass. So this one comes about having less control over your party of 4 heroes. Will that mean the backliner classes will be given more skills to use in the front ranks and vice versa?
We still class the characters. We even put it up when you're doing your recruiting at the beginning where they would prefer to be. Back, versatile, or front.
Okay.
Back row characters, by virtue of having a bigger skill set, have more things they can do from more places. But generally speaking, we really like the positional architecture of the combat. So don't expect your leper to whip out a bow and arrow from the back row and be like, no problem, I got this.
Say that.
Yeah, he's still useless as hell in the back and should never ever be in the back. He can like reflect on the beauty of the universe and heal his own stress back there, but he's not going to be doing much for the team. Okay. So yeah, we want to preserve some of those because it's part of the identity of the character. Of
course.
And it's really exciting when people break that. So like this idea of like front row Vestal or whatever, like making your Vestal into a tank. I think that's really awesome. So I'm excited to see how people, use these toolkits. The designers have done a really good job of fleshing them out, and the new skills, have some really interesting effects and should create a lot more like synergy within a team.
Great. Love it. Next question here. And you may not know the answer to this one, so maybe you want to use your pass on this. It's totally fine. Do you know if people that are playing day one on the Epic Game Store, do you know if they're going to be able to transfer over their saves to Steam?
No idea.
No idea.
I can't.
Okay. I figured as much, but I had to ask.
Yeah.
How about feedback?
Would we want to do everything we can to make the play experience great for players? Yes.
Yeah, of course. Okay, great. So talking about all those players that are going to be playing on day one, ourselves included, how are we going to get you guys feedback? What's the best way to do that?
I believe we're going to be setting our Discord up for that. I think Hades did a great job with how they structured their Discord, and we're able to capture feedback
nice.
Through there. So I think that'll be the primary channel.
Small little indie game, right?
Yeah, just this tiny little,
I don't even know if anybody played it.
Nowhere. Yeah, I don't think.
One of the best games of the last decade, hands down.
yeah, and they're a great studio, and they've been, we've known them for a couple of years, and they're very cool. And so yeah, we want to sort of like learn from how they did it.
Gotcha. Okay. So one of the things we talked about, that modularity before, the run, is that going to so starting out, you're starting here, you got to get to the top of the mountain. Inside of that, is it always going to be the same number of biomes?
Yes, currently yes.
Okay. So that means you could have 50 of them, and you're still going to have the same kind of start to finish structure.
Right. I mean, we may experiment with increasing the number of biomes in a run, or we may dial it into like a sweet spot. But if we have let's say totally like at a 1.0 or whatever, let's say we've got 5 biomes in the game. This is totally hypothetical. I'm out on a limb.
Nobody write this down.
Nobody quote me or hold me to this in any way. whatsoever.
It's fine.
But if a run is 3 biomes and there's 5 biomes to choose from, you may never see one of those biomes in that run, which enhances the individuality of that particular run. So you'd be like, man, I never, this city just never popped for me. So you get to an inn and you can choose one of 2 different, like the next region, you get a choice. And there's modifiers and mutators on those as well, which kind of makes it cool. Like little kind of sub goals.
So you're going to see in the inn, you could go to the farm or you could go somewhere else.
Yeah, so you pull up to the inn, let's say after the intro sequence, and you're like, okay, well, I got farm, get the feeder, or I've got like the sprawl, the burning city. And you'd be like, okay, well, we want to be, we're a strategy game. So you learn about the region you're about to head into. You might want to rejig your skills. You might want to provision differently. You want to buy like burn salve if you're going into the city because it's all fire all day long, and you gear up for it. And so I think the modularity is going to play great to that. If we add more biomes, you start to get to know these new places, and it changes the texture of the runs. But we want to keep the run length consistent so that I beat the game in 20 hours because all my runs were so short, and you're like, randomly mine were like 18 hours long each, and I'm still slogging through it. Like, it's just too wildly unpredictable. We want to keep the run length consistent, but make sure there's a lot of diversity in that.
So I'm kind of taking one of these questions here and morphing it. So that means with the way that you have designed the foundation, built the house, there should not be a major discrepancy in difficulty, right? What you see on day 1 is probably going to be pretty similar to what you see on day 500 because you can just kind of slot in the different biomes. You don't have to worry about over-tuning or under-tuning something at face value.
Yeah, I think like the tuning is going to be something that's ongoing, and we still want to be a difficult game. There's no question about that. But it isn't like a vertical power ascension as you go through the game. Your heroes don't get like more like on a profile level. They don't just steadily increase their damage output and the numbers get bigger and bigger. I will say though, within a run, at the end there's a mastery trainer, and you can power up each skill once. So you get a currency in fights, and then when you get to the end, you can kind of augment and the effects and the damage increase for that skill for that run, which is kind of a nice like. If you have like one of my favorite skills in the game is the Grave Robber Throwing Dagger. I don't even care if people hate it later. It's one of my personal favorites. I love it. And so the first thing I do when I get to the first inn with my first mastery token is I'm like, yeah, let's jack that one up. So I know that it's like my kind of the backbone of my damage.
Now that's not profile based though. That's only for that run.
That will wipe. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So the things that people collect, the trinkets, the stagecoach upgrades, those are going to carry over, but those mastery tokens, the relationships, all that stuff is going to get wiped between runs.
Relationships will get wiped, and what you unlock at the profile with the trinkets and stagecoach upgrades is you unlock their ability to appear in the game. So you may not see them. Like it increases the diversity of loot available to you.
Right.
But you don't start a new run, with all of this gear that you've accumulated.
Right. The only thing you're going to start with is our stagecoach upgrades, or no?
You get there's a cache, an academic cache, that will sort of like seed your run basically. So you can roll up to that early in the game before you've been kind of challenged with combat, and it'll give you a random draw based on your current profile level of I think a couple of trinkets, a couple of stagecoach upgrades, and some rudimentary supplies.
Gotcha. But the abilities, once you get them, you got them, right?
You got them. Yeah.
Okay. So you really are. I mean, granted, you were, like I said before we started streaming here, you were really at the tip of the spear when the indie kind of revolution was happening. And I'm not sure what games you play personally, but there's so many ideas that I see, brilliant ideas, don't get me wrong, from other games. Dead Cells being one of them. They very similar approach, very different games, don't get me wrong, but such a similar approach, and it works so great for that game. So I'm really excited about everything that you've talked about. Is there anything else? I don't want to not jeopardize, that's the wrong word. It's been a long day. I don't want to
jeopardize me. I'd take a pass on that.
No, well, I already did it. You're already known as Chris the dog hater, so I don't know.
Oh, wow.
Sorry. I mean, you said it. It really wasn't my fault. It was kind of you. But I don't want to overstep and take you longer than I need to. You clearly want to get back to working on icons and stuff. But you've got a month or so left before this game comes out into early access. People are excited. People are hopefully not as confused anymore. I think we've talked about a lot of stuff. I do have one more question. One of the big ones, very gameplay based, very systems based. We talked about combat a little bit. One of the things was tokens and accuracy and death blow resistances. A lot of changes in that particular department. I would love, you're a philosophical guy. Talk to me about the philosophy of changing that stuff.
I'm only qualified to talk about the philosophy.
That's fine. I know. We should have asked Tyler to come on too.
Yeah, I mean, why waste your time with me, quite frankly?
I like the philosophy stuff. This is the good stuff.
This was something that Tyler brought up early on, and we wanted to get away from 1% crit. I mean, that was kind of, in my mind, that sticks to me out of our conversations. You know, you have 1% crit. What is that? Like, yeah, it sounds like it's a little better, but it's really hard to map. And, you know, I think that led him down this path of like, what can we do with our existing combat architecture to make it feel kind of more rewarding? So when you buff, you know what you're getting. You're not just generally increasing the likelihood that you may not stub your toe later this afternoon you know, like there's so many disclaimers on a 1% crit. And so now you cast the spell, you get a crit token, your next hit will crit. And I know that I've seen some comments expressing some concern that this like somehow erodes the strategy, but I firmly believe it enriches it, because you can assign these skills and buff your players, and the consequences of enemy skills. Having this like token system running underneath your combat HUD allows you to make more strategic choices more often, and also really makes some of these support skills that felt maybe like mathematically they were good to do in the first game, but never really felt, you know, like validating in sort of the emotional sense of the word. Like you stab a guy, it looks cool, hopefully, and you know there's blood and you get a big number and you feel good. You're like, wow, I hit the upper limit of the damage on this skill. That tiny little micro hit of dopamine makes me feel good.
Yeah.
Support skill buff, and you get changes to your numbers down below. It just, even though it's effective and functional, it just didn't deliver the same, wasn't on par. And I think that's really underneath a lot of the like tuning and sort of you know, feedback around heals and support skills in the first game. Underneath all of that, I believe, was just this functional asymmetry between how it feels to support versus how it feels to attack.
So you're trying to balance those skills out. You're trying to make the support come up to that.
and make them feel like real meaty skills. So you're like, well, what did I get for using indiscriminate science, which is a new plague doctor skill? You know, what did I get for using? There it is. It's right on the screen. I know exactly what I got from it. That just feels a little better. It's not
this amalgamous number that just kind of maybe you notice, but probably not.
Yeah, and another, like one of my favorite skills in the game right now is called Ounce of Prevention. It's another plague doctor skill, and like it has a battle limit, so you can't abuse it. But I get in there, I hammer it right away, because I can see the results. All my resistances jack right up. It's like it's so much chunkier that it feels great to use these skills that never really got to kind of shine, I feel like, in the first game. And I think that's the net result. I mean, again, like Tyler or James or Dana could walk you through the mechanical implications of this shift, but really, you know, from my end of things, there's just it's a bolder, more immediate feeling and a more predictable combat flow in a good way. So it's like kind of like the marking system from the first game, but writ large. And I think it was a great experiment. We tried it before committing to it, and it stuck. And I think it's really healthy for the combat. And I think that it'll help people understand what they're doing a little more clearly. And like I said, I think it validates some of those like kind of off attack support, crowd control, that kind of stuff, because you can just see the results. You can bank on them. They're right there.
If I can quiz you quickly, can you tell us which things will play into the new token system? Which, I mean, obviously you've got stuns and things like that, plague and bleeds. Are all of that going to tie into the token system?
Well, dots are kind of their own thing. So dots just proc like they did in the first game, but status effects like immobilize, taunt. You can get a crit token. You can get a strength token, which will augment the damage of your next attack. There's a dodge token, which gives you like a huge meaty chance to dodge the next attack. And then there's counters to all of these things. So there's this awful enemy called the Urchin. He's got a little music box, and he turns himself invisible, and it's horrendous. So he procs a stealth token, right? And now you're racking your brain going, who do I have that can kill stun? Kill stealth, sorry. So Grave Robber's got something, Runaway's got something, and suddenly now you're like, okay, I can immediately place that problem. And it's the same thing with the strength token. Like his next attack is going to do so much damage. I have to find a way of stripping that off him before he gets a chance to go, or I can stun him, or I can daze him, or I can knock him to the end of the combat order. But the problem just becomes much more present. And I think that really enhances the sort of like strategic layer of combat, the problem solving, and you get to feel good more often.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's may not sound like a huge shift to a lot of people, but it's such a big shift from roll the dice chance to really strategy in the game. And it seems like you're really leaning into that. Obviously, you lean into the themes. You're clearly a guy that loves thematic content, but leaning into the strategy nature, almost like what kind of combat card games are doing nowadays.
Yeah, I think that was a big inspiration for sure.
Chad is apparently really concerned that stun is not in the game. Is stun in the game?
Stun's in the game.
I don't know why people are freaking out about that.
They shouldn't. They'll get stunned. They'll get furious. It'll happen, guys. Don't worry.
It's gonna happen.
You're gonna lose so many turns. Unbelievable numbers of turns are gonna be lost. So fret not. You will be stunned.
There you go. You will be stunned, and the Kodiak character will be coming to Darkest Dungeon 2, probably a 1.0 launch. So both things confirmed for the game. Very excited about both of them. No, I'm just kidding.
Absolutely. And I see people, we know that people want gameplay footage and all the rest, and we're going to release a launch trailer. But again, our strategy this time out with the marketing is just to go step quietly, go dark, and then just put the game in front of people and let it speak for itself. But we're going to have a launch trailer, prior to the release.
Guys, I say, Chris, give me something new. And he's like, no, you're not big enough yet, man. You got to get IGN stats before we give you any sort of good stuff. No, I'm just kidding. He didn't say that. He was very nice.
I didn't. I said I hate dogs.
Right.
I want that made clear in the interview.
Don't do that, man. You're setting yourself up for failure here. There's going to be a mod. Every character's going to have a dog head now.
I love it.
Drifting, that's going to be the first mod, because I don't know if you noticed in the chat when we were talking about the traveling, everybody wants to drift, so that's going to be the first mod. There's going to be a Chris dog mod now.
Oh, good.
Chris is ready to get back to work. So, guys, everybody, thank you to Chris. This was incredibly fun, hopefully incredibly informative to you guys that are watching at home. Darkest Dungeon 2 releases into early access on the Epic Game Store October 26th. 1.0 launch will release on Steam somewhere down the line. And Chris, any last words?
No, I just want to thank everybody for tuning in and watching, and I want to thank our team who's been working really, really hard, and we really hope that you like what we've put together for you.
All right, guys. Well, thank you to Chris, and thank you to everybody watching. Remember, of course, I got to do the YouTube thing. Hit the thumbs up, subscribe, because it does help get this video out to other people. We will leave this here on the channel. We're not going to unlist it or anything. So if you want to go back and watch it again, you can do that. And of course, Legacy Gaming will be covering Darkest Dungeon 2 when it releases. Chris is going to love our videos because we're going to tell him everything wrong with the game that he should fix right away. I'm just kidding. We won't be doing that. But yeah, we'll be covering the game here on the channel. So hopefully you guys follow along. And with that, we're going to let Chris get back to work. So thank you guys for watching. Play on. Take care. Thanks, Chris.
Thank you.